Today in the Tristen Law Show, you're going to laugh so much that you might just tear out your face muscles. You're going to meet Spencer Love, and that's today on the Tristen Law Show. Welcome to the Tristen Law Show, where I introduce you to the personalities in and out of the pro wrestling ring. The unique part is you don't have to be a pro wrestling fan to enjoy this podcast. If it is your first time here, new episodes drop Wednesdays, and welcome. I'm your host, Tristen Law, and I'm glad that you're here for another episode featuring another personality in and out of the pro wrestling ring. A few weeks ago, I sent out an all call to all Canadian pro wrestling personalities because I wanted to meet them. And I got a message from many people, and one of those people I got a message from was Spencer Love, who resides in the most western part of Canada. He's a content creator like myself and the host and curator of ilovewrestling.ca. Myself and Spencer, we're going to talk about fandoms of other genres of entertainment as compared to pro wrestling. We're going to talk about how he got his start in content creating and so much more. It's going to be a great time because Spencer, he's a great guy. And I'm sure that you'll see that too. In the future, you're probably going to be able to listen to this podcast and all of your other favorite podcasts on Facebook because from what I've heard and understand, Facebook is getting into the podcast game too. So it's going to be one extra place that you can listen to my voice every Wednesday. Speaking of listening to my voice, there are tons of ways that you can listen to my voice, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google, Spotify. Let me tell you, there are some that I don't even know. Just Google Tristen Law Show. But pretty much, wherever you find a podcast, you will be able to hear my voice. However you listen, I am glad that you're here. Up next is Spencer Love of ilovewrestling.ca. I am Tristen Law, and this is the Tristen Law Show. Hey you, yeah, I'm talking to you. That shirt you're wearing is so not cool. Why don't you head on over to tristanlawshow.com and get yourself a new shirt. Not only will you be cool, but you'll also be supporting the show. What are you waiting for? Go now and get a hat too while you're at it. Thank me later. We're the show at tristanlawshow.com. Welcome back to the Tristen Law Show, and I hope that you're having a great time. My next guest is the former owner of WCSN, the premier source of journalism in Western Canadian professional wrestling. Now, he can be heard on Love Wrestling, which you can find by typing lovewrestling.ca into your internet-enabled device. I'd love to welcome Spencer Love to the Tristen Law Show. Spencer, how are you, man? Welcome.
I'm good. It's always fun for me when people introduce me on shows to find how many times they can comfortably fit the word love into the sentence. And I'm proud to say I think you set the record. That was fantastic though, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate not only the introduction, but the fact that you said before we started recording that this was the basically put people over show. I want to put you over, man, because thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast since I just sort of discovered you, or we discovered each other online about 6 months ago. It's been enjoyable. It's nice to put a face to a name over video, over audio, and it's just nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, you know what, Spencer, I appreciate that you're here all the way in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I'm all the way over here in New York. You know, I think it's different time zones, but I appreciate you coming to hang out with me tonight, and I'm looking forward to get to know you, and I think my listeners are definitely getting ready to know you as well, too. So welcome, and here we go. So Spencer, what's your earliest memory of pro wrestling? Because I know that you're a pro wrestling fan, so what's your earliest memory?
Absolutely. I've got a bit of a unique story as a fan, I guess, or not unique, but you hear of a lot of people who grew up as professional wrestling fans and they watched Raw and SmackDown and every show every single week, as I do now as a 28-year-old. But when I was growing up, I wasn't really a traditional fan in the sense that I watched every single episode every single time I could. The first memory I have of pro wrestling, though, because I was going to my grandmother's house every Tuesday and every Thursday for lunch, the first memory I have was Brock Lesnar and Big Show breaking the ring. That is the first memory I have. I don't have a ton of favorite moments as a kid or anything like that. I first got back into professional wrestling at about 17, 18 years old. I went out to an independent show at the Century Casino here in Edmonton, Alberta. It was the Prairie Wrestling Alliance's 11th anniversary show. And, as I'm sure when you go to an indie show, it's just so cool when you look back on it, how many future stars there were on it. One of the matches I remember on the card, it was a fatal four-way between four women: Taya Valkyrie, Casey Spinelli, Tennille Taylor, who's Tennille Dashwood now, and then Veronica Weiss, who is just a great Canadian professional wrestler for a long time up here. So when you've got people like that, when you've got Ravenous Randy Myers on the card at the time, Michael Richard Blaze, who is a favorite professional wrestler of mine up here, was still going by his original name, guys who have just really influenced, and girls who have really just influenced my love as a pro wrestling fan, really came at the independent level. I didn't start watching WWE, at least consistently. Again, the first real memory that I've got was the moment that The Undertaker came back in the middle of the Brock Lesnar-Seth Rollins match. I believe it was Night of Champions 2015. And quite literally from that moment, my brothers and I sat down and watched that pay-per-view just as let's do something. And I have watched every single show every single week, unless I quite literally have had a, for lack of a better way to put it, contractual obligation.
So I always tell people that have never been to an independent pro wrestling show is that you should go, because before my first live pro wrestling event was a WWE event in June 2007. It was in Jacksonville. It might have been Extreme Rules or One Night Stand, and it was only a couple of days before I went to pro wrestling school. But I sat so far up, but I'm thinking for the amount of money that I paid, once I got into the business and I learned what indie wrestling is, for the amount of money that I paid to sit there, I could have bought all my friends to come sit with me at this independent show.
Could have bought a season ticket, for lack of a better way.
You know what? They might not have had a season ticket at this independent show, but they would have probably created one.
I was going to say they would have invented it.
Right. So and it's true that you never know who you'll see in the ring, because I've been in the ring with Damian Priest. I've been in the ring with other great people, QT Marshall, before he got on television. And I had that opportunity. And independent wrestling, it gives our fans the opportunity to experience wrestling in a more intimate kind of way. Because I see that you're a member of the KISS Army, right?
Oh, big time. Since 2002, I think. If I'd pull my card out if I wasn't doing an interview.
So for me, I can't relate to that, but here's how we can relate. If you imagine going to go see KISS at a very small venue, and you're not at a big arena, and you can literally reach out and touch them, and you shouldn't touch people you don't know, especially in COVID times, but you can reach out and just touch them. That makes the event a lot more intimate.
Yeah.
And that's why I love independent pro wrestling.
Absolutely. I work in junior hockey, which I'm sure the stereotype that Canadians love hockey, 100% true. Let's just cut the chase on that one. But working in junior hockey, where it's not really a NHL level or an AHL even as a comparable for a lot of smaller cities in the United States, this is a level where after the games, not only can you bring your kids down to meet the players, but you can come into the dressing room and again, get that one-on-one experience that I'm an NHL fan. I love the Edmonton Oilers. I am a diehard fan. But you don't get that personal connection unless, I don't mean this as a shot, but unless it's for some sort of charity event where you've got to pay some money to get in, or you happen to bump into them in a restaurant where for me, I would feel terrible bugging people like that. So you don't get that one-on-one connection in a lot of ways that you do get at the independent, again, more intimate level. So I completely agree. When you've got the opportunity to really get involved in a professional wrestling show, and I know you can throw, it's interactive theater, dance, athletics, Cirque du Soleil, any phrase like that at it, and it can apply in some way, shape, or form. When you get the opportunity to really get involved in that and, get the proverbial FU back from a wrestler when you scream it at them rather than being at a WWE or an AEW and almost adding to a crowd atmosphere, but screaming into thin air sometimes. I'll always vouch for the times you can get that intimate one-on-one experience with no lack of love to any of the big league experiences,
Mm-hmm. And I know everybody listening to this right now, they're probably going to ask, and I'm going to ask on their behalf, what is the junior hockey league? Like, what is it? How are you affiliated with them? I'm sure somebody said, oh, I wonder what he does for them. So tell them.
Yeah. I'm actually really proud of the work that I do. And actually, if you want me to put over my job again, I'll do a count for it. If you're in Edmonton, Alberta, Alley Cat Lager has lovingly supplied, Crew Brew. It is a substitute for their Skona Gold. It goes directly back into the Sherwood Park Crusaders organization. We're a proud member of the Alberta Junior Hockey League. So the best comparable I've got is we have a lot of the same ages of players as the WHL or any other junior program, but our focus as a league, not that we don't want players getting drafted directly to the NHL, and we've had a lot of success with that recently, but a lot of the players come to our league because they want to pursue the educational component as well to hockey. So as a guy, not that I was ever going to go anywhere. The kids in hockey that I work with are much more talented than I ever was in music, if that makes sense as a comparison.
Right.
But my goal as a teenager was I wanted to make it big. I wanted to be a rock star. That Kiss Army really influenced what I wanted to do. But my parents, and rightfully so, I feel, they always said, okay, pursue that as a career, get into bands, play music, but have a background. And I think that especially when you're involved in not something that's just a difficult career to get into, but let's just knock on wood, one that does come with a risk of injury or a risk of maybe having that career taken away, not due to your own actions, for lack of a better way to put it. I think it's fundamental that you have that educational background. So right after I got out of marketing school, I went to the NAIT, the J.R. Shaw School of Business at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. You can see why I struggled there because it's a lot of words to throw in, but I want to put everyone over. So that's where I went for schooling. I got my marketing degree there, and then I was lucky enough to just interview for the job with the Sherwood Park Crusaders as their marketing director. And we've sort of just gone from there. Last year, we were the #1 ranked team in the entire Canadian Junior Hockey League prior to the COVID shutdown. Not to belabor a shitty point, because everybody in some way, shape, or form has had something taken away from them. But as an organization over the last 4 years, we'd worked towards really this being the year that we chased a championship, and then had it taken away at quite literally the worst possible moment. So right now, the kind of silver lining to all of that is we were lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to get a return to play from the Alberta government. We're very, very excited about that. I think that everybody in the organization has just been reignited after having something that we really wanted to make the push for. We're just that much more excited to get back to it. So there's the long answer. The short answer is I do all of the marketing and media and sales and basically everything, I guess, that doesn't have to do with putting the team on the ice. There are people in the organization who I would rank with the best in the industry as far as putting an actual hockey team on the ice and finding talent. I have no right being a part of that. I just do the marketing and media and the sales and all of that sort of stuff, along with another gentleman named Liam Horrobin, who, if you want to go to anybody for social media advice, he would be the individual to do so, ladies and gentlemen. There's five putovers, and we're only 15 minutes in.
One of the things that I wanted to do when I was a kid was play hockey, because I tried playing football. Bro, I was only so good at football. Basketball, I couldn't dribble. People stopped being racist because a lot of people go, oh, you're black. You're supposed to be able to play basketball. It's not true. I was terrible at basketball. Baseball, I wasn't good because I used to get hit in the face with the ball a lot. But hockey, I always wanted to try hockey. So I remember one day, somebody, I don't know how, where somebody played hockey in the Bronx, but I found a hockey stick in the trash, and I remember taking it out the trash. I remember getting tape and taping it up and saying, one day I'm going to be able to find a place to play hockey. Did that ever happen, though? So the closest that I want to get to hockey is that I want to try roller jam. You know, where you go out there, you on roller skates and you rough people up. That's what I really want to do.
I've never tried that either. So for what it's worth, I will venture out on that with you.
I want to try that so badly, so I can elbow people and. I don't know how it's worked. Maybe you don't elbow people, but Spencer, what hooked you to pro wrestling?
You know, it's a lot of those same things that I alluded to earlier. I guess it's really, and I'm trying not to be cliche with it, but it is all the cliches about professional wrestling. It is that environment of anything can happen. You know, for me, relating it back to the Edmonton Oilers. If I could somehow script the Edmonton Oilers to come back in every game and win every game on a last-minute goal, and every one of those games be different somehow, but still give me that same shocking, exuberant feeling every single time. I know it doesn't happen at every single wrestling show, don't get me wrong, but that's sort of what I see with professional wrestling is that environment of everything can happen, that environment of both athletics and surrealism. Really, like, I think a lot of people see it as a shot, but I think it is the perfect description for professional wrestling, is the sort of side phrase of sports entertainment, because it is what I love about it. The Fiend could never exist in a traditional sports environment.
True.
But for me, talk about the booking. His character at his essence is one of my favorite things to ever come out in pro wrestling. I'm a Bray Wyatt mark through and through. I'm going to get made fun of on a Fightful stream if they eventually listen to me admit that, because I never will in front of any of them. But, well, Joe will make fun of me, and rightfully so. I don't want to make him grimace with that, because he's one of the greatest dudes I've ever met in professional wrestling. But that I'll put over every chance I get. But something like that can exist in a traditional sports environment. The Undertaker couldn't exist in a traditional sports environment. I love that surrealism. For all the flack they get and for all the times that I groan and shake my head at some of their storylines, stuff like the Corporate Ministry or stuff like the Brood or stuff that, you know, those are really the things that I really remember, I guess, in a bit of revisionist history, because again, 2015, you start going back and watching a lot of the old stuff and all of that. And that's really the stuff that'll always stick with me, whether I'm watching it 20 years after it happened or right now. I love that combination of everything that in theory makes pro wrestling great. Again, to be as cliche as possible with it. The storytelling, the athleticism, that cheer for the good guy, boo the bad guy, that that entertainment side of sports entertainment, the sports side of sports entertainment. Pro wrestling is just wonderful. I could spend my entire time on this podcast, to be quite honest with you, trying to describe what I love about pro wrestling. I can't sum it up. I think that it's hard to. It really, really is, because everybody loves it for a different reason, but they all love it for a lot of those same cliches that I just spouted off ad nauseum.
With the cliches that you mentioned, Spencer, a lot of people always say, "Why do you watch wrestling? Don't you know that it's, you know, like, yeah, we all know when 2021 is predetermined. We know that."
Yes.
But that's the same exact reason. All the reasons that you gave are some of the reasons that I watch other TV shows, why I watch Rick and Morty, why I've watched some other shows out there, why I've watched Lost and everything else like that. It was able to get me to suspend disbelief and pique my interest so much. That's
exactly it.
Right.
That's exactly it. And, you know, people say, of course, there's moments that wrestling is hokey or corny or,
right, again,
those cliche words. But, like, these are the same people sitting and telling me that, The Circle or whatever, the latest hot reality show. I'm a sucker for that stuff too, by the way. That's not a shot. But those are the same people sitting and telling me that The Bachelor is this emotional, heartwarming show about love. Like, okay, guys, let's just call a spade a spade. Like, right, this is what it is. Professional wrestling can be hokey, but if you're going to give me that as the critique and then sit down and watch 2.5 hours of The Bachelorette, you know, align your values a little bit, right? Exactly. I'm fully willing to admit when stuff's hokey. Do you think that I'm not the first one to make fun of Mae Young giving birth to a hand?
A hand.
Right, as everybody is. It can be dumb. There are moments I groan. We all look back at Lashley's sisters, whether we're professional wrestling fans or not, and say, that was a waste of my time, and I wish I had this 15 minutes of my life back to, like, fucking garden or something productive. But I'm also certain there have been episodes of every sort of reality TV, every sort of actual TV. Breaking Bad fans, I guarantee you can hop into their mentions and be like, hey, what'd you think of that episode with The Fly? And they'd all say, well, I wish I had that 48 minutes back, right? There's stupid stuff everywhere in every fandom. And we all accept that as part of the fandoms that we love. Anybody that has called me out and said wrestling is the word that we're not going to say here, or any of the variations of it, not one of them has ever taken me up, because I'm lucky enough to know and interact with a lot of great people here in the Alberta wrestling community. I do know a few people who operate some great training facilities that have rings that are allowed to operate under conditions in the Alberta government now and previously when people have called me out. And literally, I am stressing this in that every opportunity is available, but none of them have ever taken me up on, you want to come take a bump? Not one. And I'm not saying I'm a martyr. I took one and I ain't ever going to do one again. But I am fully speaking from the fan perspective on stuff. I will never claim there are pro wrestlers I don't like. There are pro wrestlers that I think aren't very good pro wrestlers, as everybody does, but I will never sit and say that they're doing something that I could do better. All of them can. If you've got an opinion on Baron Corbin, cool. I personally am not a fan of the King gimmick anymore. I loved when he was coming out with the spotlights, but if I'm going to sit and say Baron Corbin's a shitty pro wrestler, number one, I'm wrong. But number two, he's doing stuff that I've never done. He's accomplished things in athletics that I never will. And I can never discredit someone for that, right? So anybody sitting and calling pro wrestling anything of those words, predetermined, I'm happy to use, because people who have done things in this industry are also happy to use it. And that's the sort of staple or the sort of benchmark I'll always use. You want to use those other words? Come take a bump. And if you're okay after that, you've done more than I have if you do it twice.
I once went to the doctor because, this is years ago, because I was wrestling and somebody did a fall-away slam. To my listeners who don't understand, you hold a wrestler, your opponent, sideways in your chest, and you fall backwards and you throw them. So in the span of the move, I instead of landing flat on my back like I'm supposed to, I landed on my shoulder, and I messed up my shoulder. So I went to the doctor's office, and the nurse had the nerve to say to me, she said, well, how did you get hurt? I said, well, I'm a wrestler. She goes, oh, like, what kind of wrestling? I said, oh, like, I'm a pro wrestler, like WB Hulk Hogan. Oh, that's pretty cool. She goes, so how did you get hurt? So I explained to her how the move went, and then she leans in, and she goes, can I ask you a question? I go, yeah. She goes, isn't pro wrestling, I'll just say it. She goes, isn't pro wrestling fake? I go, well, you know what, ma'am? It is. I'm not really hurt right now. I'm just pretending. I'm here to waste your time because I have nothing else better to do, and I'm faking my injury that I got. Yep, I'm faking injury.
I, as an American, decided to come to the doctor, give you my hard-earned money.
That's right.
As a laugh. And you know what? Like, there are the people, and I will give the caveat to it, like, there are people who come at it from a genuine place of curiosity, and ignorance isn't the word that I want to use. I'm just lacking for a better one. Ignorance with genuine curiosity behind it. Okay. Like, there are people I've met who genuinely say, well, how did that happen? And the best answer, at least I can give, is, well, shit happens. But again, like, the best other answer I can give, and sometimes I don't give it sarcastically, is there are people in Alberta that can teach you much better than I and can show you much more safely than I can why this isn't that F word.
So way back in the intro, I mentioned that you were the former owner of WCSN. What was is WCSN?
Well, I'll try not to be long-winded with it, admittedly. So the WCSN originated in 17, as Win Column Sports. So actually, through my work with the Crusaders, as you do in independent wrestling, you get to meet a lot of great people, whether it be fans, whether it be volunteers, whatever. So one of the volunteers that we had was a gentleman named Len Nunes. And if you talk about people who are passionate about supporting their local sports scenes, if there was some sort of proverbial award, I would be happy to write the essay for his nomination. He, to this day, continues to inspire me on that end. He just genuinely does. So he came up to me after a Crusaders game in January 2017. He said, hey, so I'm starting up a site called Win Column Sports. he had written for previous sites before, and I can't speak to that experience, but from what I can believe, or what I'm led to believe, is Len just sort of wanted to do things that he wanted to do when he wanted to do them in a casual setting, which is something that I can so appreciate. It's something I'm trying to follow right now. So he approached me and he quite literally just said, hey, I'll buy you a beer once a month if you'll just write WWE pay-per-view previews for me. I had never, outside of doing, writing the previews for the Crusaders or stuff that was like my traditional marketing experience, I'd never blogged. I'd never done anything like that in stuff that I was experienced in, nonetheless, pro wrestling. But I love pro wrestling, so I figured, screw it, the Royal Rumble's coming up, let's do it. So I started writing articles for this site, and I think it's a mentality that you can really relate to too, is when you've got a good thing going, there's no sense in leaving it just being that good thing if you love it.
Right.
Pursue it. Try and do something with it if you love it. And I can't remember who said it because I admittedly listen to a lot of podcasts. But somebody recently in a podcast I was listening to said, the best advice I ever got was find what you love and then find a way to make money doing it.
Facts.
So it wasn't traditionally to make money doing it. It was maybe I can get 2 beers, and maybe if I do well with that, I can have 3 beers and Len will drive me home so I don't have to worry about a bad DUI. So again, just that's sort of half joking, but quite literally it was, because I thought I was putting effort into these articles, I was trying to have fun with them. I thought they were things that were worth being read. Promote them. I'll try and throw them up on Squared Circle where I'm still banned for self-promotion. I will throw them up in if it's an NXT related article, I'll put it up in Reddit or wherever I possibly can find out, whatever it may be. Just try and do better and better to promote it. So I started actually getting a pretty good following for the pay-per-view stuff. So what I felt the next logical step was, I'm going out to independent shows all the time. Let's start covering the independents out here. Completely unsolicited. I'm sure it's sometimes definitely unappreciated. But I started going out, and in the same way that I've talked to you now, in the same way that I choose to sort of pursue my business now, I really didn't want to go out and be negative. My thought was I'm going to go out and promote foreshadowing what I love about professional wrestling here in Alberta. Right. So just started writing my pay-per-view, my independent recaps here. I started with the PWA because, as I've mentioned him a couple of times before, Michael Richard Blaze is like quite literally my favorite professional wrestler in independent wrestling right now, arguably in wrestling. So I started going out, watching every show, recapping them on the site. And because I was, again, promoting, started to get a bit of a following in the Albertan community. So, to sidetrack a bit, it was about a year. I remember that the first review that I did for the PWA was in August or September, whichever was their annual Fall Fever event. It's changed every so often. So there we go. I'm not getting fact checked on that one. So I started getting a bit of a following. I started growing on the independent sort of level, quote unquote. And around that time, as much as Len, and I will always say this to his full credit, as much as he is a passionate follower of any independent sport, any local sport, anything like that, he is the most dedicated person to his family. I also think I can point to in any sort of essay or any sort of award. So when the site started to grow and when there started to be stuff that was interfering with family life, he wanted to back off a little bit. I kept thinking, let's keep a good thing going. Let the good times roll. So I bought the site from him in January 2018 and just naturally started to gravitate towards professional wrestling. So that's when we changed it to the WCSN because admittedly, I wanted to make sure I was loyal to what Len had done. He was a great writer. I made sure all of his work was still highlighted, all of that sort of stuff, as well as everybody on the site. But I figured calling something Win Column Sports when you're focusing, excuse me as my pup barks, calling it Win Column Sports when you're trying to network into something that's really not a traditional sport maybe wasn't the best branding, for lack of a better way to put it, I guess. So we became the WCSN shortly after I took over. I started to really try and pursue every avenue that I could. I started, I think, 3 podcasts with 3 different guest hosts. And then I started a 4th podcast where I started doing interviews and just started growing and growing and growing, admittedly, from there. It was about 3 years of that. And then, well, 2.5, I guess. And then just prior to the pandemic, about a year ago now, honestly, I just started to get, I guess, a bit of burnout with it. I was sponsored by a couple of great individuals, but it wasn't like it was paying for the farm, for lack of a just a better way to put it. I was taking a lot of time again out of my own family life and out of my time with pups and all of that sort of stuff. So I started to consider maybe changing my role or doing something else and maybe letting someone else take over the majority of it. Pandemic hits. Who would have thought that that would change people's plans?
Tell me.
So sitting at home and doing nothing outside of trying to do what I could for work, which admittedly, when you're a hockey team and you're a guy trying to sell sponsorships and tickets, is pretty hard to do when you don't have a hockey team to sell. Some time opens up in times that you normally wouldn't get. For example, I would be working as much as I could in the morning and try and make an 8-hour day. Like I mentioned off the bat in the podcast, I was lucky enough to be kept on by a hockey team that wasn't playing throughout a time that admittedly it could have been pretty easy to justify not doing that. So I tried to do as much as I humanely could. But when you're trying to do as much as you can for something that's not running, time opens up at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. in the afternoon sometimes. So I thought, let's reinvest. Let's see if I can get some passion back into it. And admittedly, I did. I started getting lucky enough to interview people that, in a way that a lot of Albertan professional wrestlers and local professional wrestlers are heroes. I felt confident in my ability to chat with them because I do feel that, just as we're going to talk about and have talked about in Twitter messages and DMs and all that sort of stuff, the Canadian wrestling scene is a little underappreciated. So the more I could be doing to promote that and the more I could be talking to the people here that I think are great wrestlers, a lot of them were very kind and very eager to give me that time. When I'm reaching out to WWE as someone who, like, just not to undersell what I'm doing, but I'm not Sports Illustrated, I'm not Fightful, I'm not Pro Wrestling Sheet or any of the people out there that are doing and will continue to do great work. And I just want to shout Gary Cassidy out there as well because he's phenomenal at what he does and has been a huge mentor. It's tough to get interviews with people in WWE and AEW, especially when it's not full time.
I agree.
So luckily enough, like I've mentioned with Chelsea Green, I do apologize for my pup. I'm sure the mail person's going by or something like that. But I got lucky enough, man, that like people like Chelsea Green and people like TJ Wilson and PCO and people that, quite frankly, even when I was sending them messages, I didn't even feel I had the cachet or the right, for lack of a better way to put it, to chat with. They took time out of their day and have continued to take time out of their days and schedules to chat with me. So I was lucky enough to continue to extend from there, but admittedly, it was a bit of a short-term fix. I always knew I wanted to do something in wrestling. I thought that the WCSN was something that could use a lot of improvement, and in the nicest way possible to what I was doing. And in, I guess, the best way I can put it to you, Tristen, is sometimes good things have to go so that great things can happen. And so that perfect things, in your opinion, whether I'm right or wrong on that with Love Wrestling, can happen.
Right.
So I made the decision, let's shut down, let's lay low, let's plan something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Let's plan on trying at least to work with a lot of people that I just want to work with. Jeremy Lambert on Fightful as well says it best. I just want to do cool shit with my friends, or I just want to do dope shit with my friends.
Fair enough.
And that's sort of what I took the time to do. So I shut down in July 31st, 2020 was the official shutdown of the WCSN. The domain expired on January 24th. If anybody wants no brand value, I guess. But I started planning quite literally from the couple of seconds after I shut the WCSN down on what was to become Love Wrestling. There's the short story.
That's pretty awesome because the pandemic is the reason why I'm sitting here as well, too. I got the idea that I wanted to put people over. Obviously I don't have any formal, broadcast training. You know, I meet people, I ask questions, I watch YouTube videos, and here I am. I'm talking to you. But another thing you mentioned as well too is like those big time wrestlers, like they don't talk to us. You know, I've mentioned, I've slid into the DMs of some very popular people, hoping I'd get a message back, and you know they never messaged me back, which puts me on my trip that I don't care how big I ever get, I always want to try to be on somebody's podcast. And there's somebody right now that's trying to get me on their podcast, but I'm like, my schedule's just so tight sometimes. Like, even if it's at midnight Eastern time, I will meet you at midnight Eastern time on a Zoom call or Skype or however you do it, and we're going and we are going to get it done. But you were talking about your newest venture, which is Love Wrestling. And for my American listeners who may not know, or for listeners who are in other countries, because everybody listens to the Tristen Law Show, what is Love Wrestling?
I'm having a tough time, and I sat down with a guy a week ago and did an interview as well, and since then I've been trying to find a better way to put it, but I can't really. Love Wrestling is quite literally what it is. It is at least attempting to be a celebration of what I and what our fellow contributors at Love Wrestling love about professional wrestling. See, there's 5 times you can get in a sentence. That's what I wanted to pursue. With the WCSN, I tried to take on, for lack of a better way to put it, because I think it does, the word discredits a lot of hard work that wrestling journalists do. For lack of a better way to put it, I tried to take that dirt sheet approach and tried to report on a lot of the stuff taking place in Albertan wrestling, not in a negative way. My theory was always, if a promotion was to announce something, I wanted to know it far enough in advance that I could write an article, and I could be, if you saw promotion XYZ is announcing this match, then the next tweet in your feed was me announcing it. I never wanted to take anything away from the professional wrestlers and the promotions here, because them announcing big stuff it's their bread and butter, right? You know, in a way that WWE, if somebody leaks in advance that Lesnar is going to wrestle Goldberg a month in advance, just as an example of something I read before it happened,
right?
They're still going to get their buys. Goldberg, Brock Lesnar are still going to earn their paydays, rightfully so. And everybody in that company, in an ideal world, because they've done some questionable stuff, I think, for lack of a better way to put it, everybody in an ideal world still makes their money if it's leaked or not. At the independent level, if I was to be enough of a jerk and announce that somebody was to come in early enough in advance that it would impact a promotion's pre-sale on their VIP or whatever it may be, and again, not to claim that I'm the be-all, end-all, if it's one person that sees that they're doing that because of me and decides not to go, or takes away from somebody's opportunity to wrestle or make money or whatever it may be, that was the last thing I wanted to do. But I wanted to take, again, the approach of being that second person in the tweet, or the first source that will release an article about it, I guess. In doing that, I found myself quite literally writing. I would be up at about 3 or 4 a.m. Mountain Standard, so 5 Eastern. I would write for about 4 hours before I'd go to work. I'd release 3 or 4 articles before I went to work an 8-hour day, get home, preset as much as I could for the next day and go from there. I was putting out individually 10 to 12 articles a day by myself. And not like they were these big, long, eloquent, you know, I'm not writing the Iliad, but it takes a lot. It really takes a lot to do that. So getting into having to writing a lot of obligatory articles, or articles I wasn't passionate about, or articles that were more news rather than telling the stories of pro wrestlers and people in it, which is what I love to do. Man, is that a drain, you know? And especially if I was getting paid to watch Monday Night Raw through a lot of 2018 and 19, okay. But when you're sitting there and trying to recap what objectively wasn't great at points for free, when again it's taken away from time with your loved ones, your family, whoever it may be, that's a drain. So I started to want to get away from that. And with Love Wrestling, my theory has been, you know, I'm still lucky enough to break some news. I'm still lucky enough to get to release cool stories about people. But rather than just the example I give is, you know, rather than send out, here's Chelsea Green's quote on not being a part of Retribution, let's tell the story, because I think it was fun for it to be a laugh between both of us when she told me the story of, okay, no, that just didn't happen. I sometimes learn things on the dirt sheets. Like, Chelsea Green is one of the most fun individuals I've ever had the chance to talk to. And just like, I don't have a better way to put it, but like getting to watch her clap back to people saying stuff like that is just so fun for me. And I like, it's not much different. At the end of the day, I'm still putting out the same quote. It's just telling that story and telling it more in the context of, I asked the question, I laughed, rather than just Spencer Love in italics versus Chelsea Green in straight, so you can tell whose quote is whose. I like doing stuff like that. I like writing them on my time, for lack of a better way to put it. And I think most importantly with Love Wrestling, I'm very lucky to work with a lot of great individuals, and not that I didn't with the WCSN. And specifically, I want to point out both Kyle Shaw. If you guys have the chance, go and follow Monday Night Shaw on Twitter. He is the latest winner of Thursday Night Quizplex on Love Wrestling, but he's a hell of a dude, and another guy who does some great interviews with local talent and just great people in the wrestling scene. And then Mike Maloney, who's the owner and founder of Backbreaker Media. He has been by my money, even not in spite. That's not the right negative connotation to put on it, but even with what I was doing with the WCSN, and I was lucky enough to work with him with it. He's the authority as far as it goes for me, as far as Albertan wrestling goes. If you guys are looking to watch some great content from the wrestlers we've got out here at Backbreaker Media, MEDI. The joke is that they don't need the A at the end. They're Canadian. We've already got A. But just a great human being. Another guy who just is very passionate about supporting great people in Canadian pro wrestling, about supporting great wrestlers and putting out great content. So, I just want to make sure those guys are credited so it doesn't sound like a shot at what I previously did. But I'm so lucky to have people working with me with Love Wrestling. And you guys can go and check out all their Twitter handles when I tweet them out every so often, because I'm not going to name 15 people. I would have to name 15 people. I am so lucky to work with everybody I do on that site and the work that they put in and the things that they're willing to do, much in the same way that you and I talk about and you allude to earlier of, I'll be up until midnight Eastern. Zach from Montreal, he's up until 12 Eastern most nights because I'm effing terrible at graphics and he's great at them and he'll do them for us. Right. And Josh Robinson, he's based out of Australia. I never thought I would meet people from Australia that not only would I become friends with, but become a source of inspiration and a guy that I just love to interact with and does an effing great job of content, Turnbuckle Rewind keeps showing me new matches to check out. Had you ever heard of the Field of Honor event the Ring of Honor put on in 2015? Because if you had, Tristan, that makes one of us on this podcast. And Roderick Strong wrestled Okada. And they do a full watch along and they give the background on the match. And it's just everybody on there, whether it's Ferris with Dream Slam or Amanda or Game Time Art or Rob, or again, now I am going to eventually name all 15 people, whether it be Magsy or Paul. I'm so lucky to work with such great individuals, whether it's people who I'm just starting to work with or guys like Chris Parrish, who have not only been great sources of inspiration in professional wrestling, but I don't think anyone's ever busted my balls harder in professional wrestling and given me more laughs in professional wrestling.
So on my interview wish list, Spencer, I have CEO of WWE Vince McMahon and WWE executive and my favorite pro wrestler, Triple H. And that's just to name a few. Who do you have on your interview wish list?
Oh, man. So I don't know if you're doing this, quite honestly, you either gave me the perfect tie-in or hell yeah, you're great at research. Quite literally half an hour before we started this interview. In 2019, the first interview I ever released was March 3rd, 2019. That was with Michael Richard Blaze. And before I did that, about a week before, I sat and did up my first dream wish list of people I wanted to interview. I've been so lucky in the fact that other than 3 people who are on what I'm going to show you, I've been lucky enough to cross every name off that wish list. So today, Tristan, I came up with the second wish list. So rather than make you guys read it all, because that's a pain in the ass to do if you're listening to an audio podcast, some of the names on here, I won't list all of them because I want to get the hashtag clout on hashtag Twitter. I want those super followers, so I got to start marketing for it. Number one on that list is Natalia Neidhart. A lot of these people on this list have, it's an odd way to put it, I guess, but like a lot of emotional ties for me to the Albertan wrestling scene, or reasons that I fell in love with professional wrestling early. So again, much in the way I talk about Taya and talk about Casey Spinelli, I was lucky enough to watch Natalia wrestle here. I watched her tag with her dad, and to tell you what an inspiration that was to me, even both then realizing what a cool match you're watching as an indie fan, but then to look back on it where, you know, I'm lucky enough to be now and be able to say I got to watch Jim the Advil Neidhart wrestle live. Even now, you know, it's weird to say because it doesn't bring this sort of emotion then. Right. It sort of brings now, right? So a couple names on there. Natalia, Jinder Mahal. Somebody laughed at the fact that he was on my list. I just want people to know I'm quite serious in that. Right. I've listened to a few interviews that he's done. Oh, man. And he just seems, I've never had the pleasure of meeting him, but from anybody I've spoken to in Alberta, from anybody I've heard do interviews with him, whether it's Busted Open or whatever, he just seems like the greatest dude. Just the greatest dude. I'd love to talk to him. He was the first Calgarian to win the WWE Championship since Bret Hart in 1997. There's a fun fact for everybody. So Jinder's on the list. If you're Canadian and Bret Hart's not on your dream list, I don't know what you're doing. Renee Paquette, Spike Dudley, I would love to talk to. Billy Kay, because I don't think there's anybody more entertaining right now in pro wrestling. And the last one I will give is Gangrel, because Gangrel in 2019, one of the best independent shows I've ever had the opportunity to go to. It was in May 2019, and I want to say May 3rd, but I also feel like I've said the 3rd a lot in this conversation, so it might just be stuck in my head. But at the start of May 2019, Real Canadian Wrestling had their anniversary show. Matt Taven was there as Ring of Honor heavyweight champion, and Gangrel wrestled in the main event against Big Jess Youngblood. And that, to this day, I will put on my list as one of the most entertaining matches I've ever gotten to watch live. So Gangrel, people talk about Carlito and people like that are sort of, this is meant fully as a compliment, but people who maybe aren't on that like A list of, oh, I want Stone Cold to come back, I want Shawn Michaels to come back. Maybe those people who take a little bit more thought. Right. I think the Gangrel is poised to have an MVP-like run at some point in the future. I really do. That dude's tearing it up. He's training some great pro wrestlers. Like, he's just cool as shit. There's no other way to put it. He's Gangrel, guys. Why would you not want to watch that guy wrestle? But he's just super talented. So I would like to speak to him too. There's a few of them.
Fun fact, because of Gangrel, I wanted to be a vampire when I was a kid, but I didn't want to drink blood. Just
well, and I'm allergic to wine, so the brood gimmick would never work for me. I couldn't do the whole sip when you're walking up the steps.
You know what? I don't think anybody was wasting wine back then. And it's probably food coloring with water. As we would say in the wrestling business, it was working blood, brother, not shooting blood.
A very astute point. I really can't top that one. That's a fair one, Trist.
So that's pretty cool that you have your interview list, and I have my like I said, I have my list as well too. And there's a lot of people who I've shot my shot at, and there's a lot of people who I'm still waiting. You know, I've shot my shot at some people, and they've never messaged me back. And it's made me really double back and not want to interview such big names because they're busy and whatever the case may be. Some people even ask me, some names that I reach out to, ask me, hey, am I paying them to be in my podcast? I'm like, no. Yeah. And I've reached out to, other people that are in the podcast business. One friend who's had RVD on his podcast, the Last Minute Wrestling podcast. He's like, dude, you shouldn't have to pay for anybody on your podcast. I'm giving you the opportunity to get yourself
saying
over.
That, and it's one of my favorite things. If you want to talk about great businessmen in pro wrestling, this is purely a rumor, but I do want to ask him about it if I was ever lucky enough to interview RVD. There was a rumor I've heard from a couple of pro wrestlers that he would charge an extra X amount of money to do a 5-star frog splash in indie matches. Because, and you can probably give me a little insight into this, is I would have to assume, but from what I've been told, it's one of the more taxing moves to do to your body. So RVD's logic was essentially, from what I've been told, if I'm going to do a move that's this taxing on my body, I'm going to make 5 figures for it. And if that's true, I would like to virtually shake RVD's hand, because at the end of the day, if you're a professional wrestler, I'm a podcaster. I am, like, in the nicest way possible to what I want to do. I'm on the low end of things, guys, and I'm happy to admit that. If you're a pro wrestler, it's the wrestling business. And if you can make an extra X amount of money for doing something that people want to see you do, make hay while the sun shines, brother.
You know what? I've never heard that. I've never had the opportunity to work with Rob Van Dam. I've had the opportunity to work with many ECW originals and WWF stars. I had the opportunity to wrestle a tag match with Jim the Anvil Neidhart back in maybe 2013.
So cool.
You know, so like let me tell you, I'm not mad at RVD if he's charging extra to do the 5-star frog splash.
Oh,
because
dude,
that's why everybody shows up.
I mean that, like, fully as a compliment. I hope anybody listening does not take that as any sort of shot. That is smart, because at the end of the day, and again, I say this to full credit for anybody who's ever stepped in the ring, people are quite literally giving their bodies for people. That's not a unique point, but it's one that should be stressed at every opportunity. People are quite literally taking, not to make it sound too serious, but it is serious, years off their lives, or they're sustaining injuries that, at the end of the day, if they wanted to, like we talked about earlier, like go and work in a factory, you possibly could, if this wasn't what you were doing as a passion and as a labor of love at the end of the day. I've never done that. I've never done that at all. So I think if anybody can make some more money, take care of their families, take care of what they want for putting their bodies on the line, hell yeah. If people are willing to pay it, heck yes. Heck yes.
A few episodes ago, I interviewed Jeremy Prophet, who is also a Canadian pro wrestler. He said Canadian independent wrestlers don't have the same opportunities to make it big time like us independent wrestlers here in the States. What are your feelings towards Canadian independent wrestlers not getting their fair shake?
I think, not to belabor a point, first of all, it's an obvious point to make, and one that just has to be said anytime you're talking about the Canadian pro wrestling scene. The border issue is certainly a barrier. If there was some sort of clarity, and I don't know any sort of border laws or anything, so this is just me spitballing what I feel should happen. Whether there's logic behind it or not, I don't know the logistics. But a lot of American professional wrestlers, it seems, are able to come up to Canada scot-free, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, and rightfully so. If we're in North America and you've got the opportunity to travel and get your name out there on an international scope, again, make hay while the sun shines. With the Canadian border issues, I don't know exactly what the reasoning is that people do get banned for trying to cross or go down to try and work. I don't know the logistics of work visas. I can't stress that enough, right? But, there are pro wrestlers out there, without naming names because some don't like being named with it, that have lost opportunities because of being banned from crossing the border. An easy example that I think a lot of people are aware enough of that I don't feel like a dick saying it is Speedball Mike Bailey. Like, his ban, I believe, is up in the next couple of months, that he's had since 2017 or 18, whatever the 5-year math on that is. He's a guy that, by my money, if you were to have him in 2018, like, he should have signed with WWE if that was what he so chose, or he could sign with AEW if that was what he so chose. He should be a star in a major promotion. I'm biased saying it. I think he's one of the most talented pro wrestlers in the world. But if he didn't have those border issues, yes, he went and made a great deal of himself, and rightfully so, in England and Germany at the WXW Gold Carat and all of that sort of stuff. He's a guy, though, that I think he should make a lot of money for doing what he's doing, for lack of a better way to put it. He's talented. He's unique. He's entertaining. I watch him on Twitch every opportunity I get, and I can tell you, as a 28-year-old man, Twitch is confusing and scary for me. I don't understand how to use it, but I'll hop on there to watch Speedball.
Right.
He's entertaining. He's a great human being from everything that at least I can tell as an outsider. And he's someone that, if at least in my outsider's interpretation, could have crossed the border and made that proverbial major league deal, would be a major star, and is a major star, but could be a major star, to be ineloquent with it. The border issue, though, that's all I'm going to belabor that. I think that both on a lot of pro wrestlers and a lot of professional wrestling promotions ends, there just could be more done. I think that the distance between towns, the distance between consistent areas to work is definitely an impediment. In speaking to people in the United States and in the New York area and that sort of stuff, you know, you can drive and do a show at 2 p.m, drive and do a show at 7 p.m.
Right.
And for the most part, and in the most part here in Alberta, we're lucky enough that both Edmonton and Calgary run consistently, but it's very rare that they, you know, get the opportunity to do sort of the 2 and 7. They'll run at 7 p.m. Two promotions will run the same night. Sometimes it happens in the same city. So it's not even like you can go because of the, what I feel are odd, to say the least, restrictions on professional wrestlers being able to work for other promotions that we have here in Alberta. You can't even go from, say, doing an opening match at 7 p.m. in Alberta to going and working a main event for another promotion here in Edmonton on the same night. Talent is limited that way, at least in the Albertan scope. I know that BC and Ontario, there are those differences, but there aren't those promotions in driving distance. And again, usually all of them are running their evening shows. You don't get that opportunity to sort of double down. The distance is an issue. If you wanted to do, I know that the easy phrase, so I'll use it, is if there was an NXT Canada that'd solve all of Canada's problems. Well, the only reason I would agree with that is because of the financials for it. WWE could afford to fly talent in if they were to, say, base in Toronto and wanted to bring in an MRB and an Artemis Spencer and a Golden Boy Travis Williams and a Nicole Matthews and a Michael Allen Richard Clark and a Heavy Metal, and I'll put over 1,000 people, so don't worry, this ain't the end of them. They could afford to bring all those people in, bring the viewership to justify paying all those plane tickets and make the cash cow that way, right? I don't think there's going to be an independent promotion that, rightfully so, will have that monetary investment to put in. It's not a lack of talent. It isn't a lack of anything like that. The financials are an issue. And then I do, again, to go back to my previous point before I started rambling, I think that there are a lot of opportunities, whether it be Twitch, whether it be more wrestlers doing promos online, whether it be, you know, the easy example, and rightfully so, I think, is Ethan Page. You look at what that guy's done as an Ontarian professional wrestler and his vlogs and, you know, even going out of his way to create matches that I know Impact, in his words, did a butcher job of it. But the Karate Man versus Ethan Page matches and stuff like that, that they're going out and he's going out and doing as an independent wrestler, not as an Impact star, as an indie wrestler. Is everybody going to be able to do that? I don't think so. I think he's one of the most talented dudes in the world. But if that's what it's going to take to be noticed in Canada, it might be a lot to ask. But if you're asking to be signed by a major promotion, I don't think it is. You know, Ethan Page doing what he's doing and Warhorse doing what he's doing. I know he's not Canadian. It's just good examples of people to look at in media doing what he's doing. You know, two people over in Ontario, Von Vertigo and Holden Albright, going out and putting on Backyard Pro and Go Hard Pro Wrestling and what they were doing over the pandemic and the opportunities they had. Again, there are some things that, whether I'm right or wrong, and I've been critiqued for it before, but damn it, I'm planting my flag and have the platform to do it. Thank you, Tristen. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a lot more that can be done to push for that being the standard, rather than, well, let's just tweet out our matches and tweet out our results from the night before and not promote when our star signs with WWE or when something great happens outside of sort of the proverbial four walls of our promotion, you know?
Right.
There's a lot that can be done. I think there's a lot that can be done on promotions ends, on wrestlers ends, on, for lack of a better way to put it, on a groundswell effort for stuff to be done. MRB, I'll go back to again. I'll put that guy over every opportunity I get. If you've got the opportunity to go and check out the Clandestine Society show from December 2019, I think that that is a great example, at least on the Western Canadian end. I gave you a couple for Eastern Canada. That's a great example of what can be done when Canadian professional wrestlers pull together. and he was the guy that, I know there were a lot of people behind it, but he was the guy who spearheaded it, brought in great talent, put on great matches. For better way to put it, I got to watch both my first ever death match on that card and my first ever dildo on a pole match on that card. So there you go. Check out Backbreaker Media. It is well worth your money to check out even just that card specifically, as well as the great stuff they've got there. I just think again, a lot in the way that we talk about professional wrestlers, I've never promoted before, so I do want to say this with that caveat, but I think that there is a lot of room for a higher standard on all ends.
From talking to everybody about Canadian wrestling, and like I said, I'm using my platform to get my fellow brethren and sisters, or my non-binary peers from Canada. I want to get them over, because it's so easy for me to put on a pro wrestler from New Jersey or New York, right? It's easy because I have access to that, because I am a wrestler from New Jersey and New York. But I now want to use my platform to let everybody know that Canadian pro wrestlers are not getting their fair shake. Yeah, okay, fine. Some people might say, hey, well, why don't you shut your mouth because you're possibly taking an opportunity from an American. Yeah, I get that. But you know what? Talent is talent. And if there's talent that's waited to be seen, or it's talent that's waiting to be discovered, you're going to hear them or hear about them on the Tristen Law Show. So I'm going to put the gun to your head right now, Spencer, right? Gun to your head. I want to know, in your opinion, who is the number one person from Canada who should be signed to WWE, AEW, or another American big league, and what makes that person so special?
Michael Richard Blaze, and I hope, and I will ask respectfully, that I at least get a platform for a couple of casual shout outs in a bit here, because there are a lot of people that I do also feel are very, very deserving of that. I don't want to discredit that at all. Michael Richard Blaze, though, by my money, number one, I said it earlier, so I have to give the caveat for my bias here. Both personally and professionally, though, at least for me, I can't think of a guy who's done more for the Albertan professional wrestling scene over the last little bit, save for Heavy Metal, who's done some great work with opening, the Top Talent Wrestling Academy, and just in the general sense. I just need to make sure he's shouted out as well. As far as it goes, though, with MRB, the guy's trained by TJ Wilson, Tyson Kidd. The guy's been noticed and put over by guys like, again, TJ Wilson, Natalia, Cody Rhodes. He wrestled the second last match for Samoa Joe on the independent scene before Joe went, and he had already signed with NXT. He just hadn't gone yet. They allowed him to finish off his independent dates. That guy has done more, number one, to bring eyes to the Albertan scene through stuff like that, and wrestling the big names and doing great work with the big names. But he's also done on a groundswell level. I mentioned the Clandestine Society earlier. The work he's done and the people he's been instrumental in training here, whether it's Zoe Sager or Gigi Ray, or anybody, again, he's working at the Top Talent Wrestling Academy. So anybody who's going there is learning from some of the best of the best. I think that in and of itself is enough for him to go anywhere that he wants to, whether it's wrestling, producing, training, whatever. As a worker, though, if you guys want to, you can check him out in WWE. He's wrestled Kenta. He tagged with Lars Sullivan against DIY. He was one of the three men to team against Braun Strowman in Seattle in 2016, which I know that when you're, I hate the phrase, but enhancement talent, yes, you're going to lose, but it's pretty easy as well to tell when people are talented. And you even watch him go face to face with Braun Strowman, and he gets that sort of shine. And if people in WWE are noticing that he's good enough to draw that interest in that short amount of time that he's on TV, I think that speaks volumes. I know he was going to go down and train with TJ in November, I believe it was. Unfortunately, until that had to get canceled. And, TJ's made the point, or Tyson Kidd, has made the point, because I want everybody to know how good these guys are. He's made the point often that all that MRB needs to do is get the right eyes on him, and he'll get signed. It's not will he get signed, it's he will get signed. I firmly believe that. That guy's going to be a star. 5 years from now, 2 years from now, you're going to listen back to this podcast because it's going to show up on the first page of Google when you look up Michael Richard Blaze, because that guy's going to be making a lot of money for a promotion somewhere. He's a hell of a human being. He is arguably a better professional wrestler, but I'd argue not, just because of how good of a human he is. Pro wrestling needs more people like MRB. And I think that he would be an asset to any promotion.
I love that. Just give him the opportunity. Because once he gets the opportunity, it's his to lose, and he's not going to lose.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, man, and it's not to crap on other people, because people who are talented, whether you've wrestled for a long time or not, if WWE or AEW deems you good enough to sign, you deserve it, as far as I'm concerned. True. But he is a guy who he has earned every one of those opportunities. He has absolutely earned every one of those opportunities. WWE shouting him out on the tryout that they did here in 2019 in Toronto. He's one of the first people they mentioned as part of the announcement that they did a Canadian tryout, along with Rohan Raja, who is another individual who did get signed, which I think bodes well for him. I can't say enough good about him. Again, much like we talked about earlier, and like, let's just put people over. In his case specifically, I really couldn't say enough about him, both personally and professionally.
Well, I'm glad that you got the opportunity to let everybody know about what's happening in Canada when it comes to pro wrestling. You gave us the one person. Grant, I didn't make it fair because I said one, but hey, you know what?
I could literally, and it's such a good problem to have, but I could quite literally, I'm sure, go province by province with you, territory by territory, and I would still find myself having a tough time just listing one person. We're incredibly blessed in Canada, wherever you may be with a great indie scene. Distance just sucks. I want to see more of them live.
Well, what's next for Spencer Love?
You know, what's next is keep on keeping on, I suppose, because I'm so enthusiastic and so hopeful for both what I'm doing with Love Wrestling and for wrestling that I get to watch live and in the flesh here in Alberta and here in Canada, right? It's a very, very good time, like I just said, to be a Canadian wrestling fan, and as a guy who is lucky enough to be involved in professional wrestling in Canada, I couldn't be more excited. With Love Wrestling, again, don't want to be cliche with it, but I just want it to grow. I want people to be able to come to Love Wrestling and leave with a smile on their face, for lack of a cheesier way to put it. If I could find one, I guarantee to you I would find that cheesier way to put it. But I want people to celebrate professional wrestling for everything we've talked about here, whether it's the professional wrestling aspect of it, whether it's the people involved in it, whether it's the entertainment aspect, whether it's the storyline aspect, whether it's the what the fuck is going on aspect of it sometimes, because, man, there's nothing I love bonding with more than other professional wrestling fans, and sometimes it just takes something like Mae Young's hand to do it, right? So whatever it may be, I will find a way to exhibit some sort of love of professional wrestling and exhibit some sort of love for it, as long as it allows me to continue to take opportunities like chatting with you, like hopping on the podcast, like working with the great people of Love Wrestling, like getting to grow and work with the people like Jeremy and Sean and Joe and all of the other great human beings at Fightful. Joel Pearl as well. Got to shout him out specifically because I know Jeremy won't. I'm an incredibly lucky person. And I said this on the Nitromaniacs podcast about a couple of weeks ago. If in some small way I can inspire either new people to fall in love with this wonderful, wacky world of professional wrestling that I love, or if Love Wrestling can serve as a conduit to inspire the people that work with us to go on to greater and better things, or if somebody looks and says, Josh, you do great video work, come work for us, or Ferris, you might be the smartest women's wrestling fan I've ever listened to in my life, come work for us. If people can get opportunities, if people can get a grin, if people can just feel a little bit more positive about an industry that can be negative in what is a negative time. Let's get real. As much cool stuff and great stuff has come out of this COVID pandemic, it's still a pandemic that has affected a lot of people. And if there's some way that I and what we do can take people's minds off of it, I think that's just the goal of professional wrestling as a whole, and something that I am lucky to be able to adapt myself.
Wow, that was awesome, Spencer. I loved having you here. But tell everybody else who probably loves you as well, too, Spencer Love. See, I did it. How they can find you.
You got it 6, damn it.
How they can find you outside of the Tristen Law Show.
Well, if you want to follow me specifically, you can find me on Twitter at SpennyLove. I'm also on Instagram if you're strictly looking for pictures of my puppy. He's great, so I'd recommend it. I'm just a little less interactive, to be quite honest with you. So that's at Spenny and the Jets with 2 S's at the end. But for everything you love about professional wrestling, just show your love of wrestling with Love Wrestling. We can be found pretty well everywhere at Love Wrestling CA. The only difference is the website. That's lovewrestling.ca. But you can also find me again if you just turn this podcast around and listen to another episode of me lovingly being hosted by Tristen Law. I think I got 7 in there, but I'm not sure if lovingly counts, honestly.
Lovely does not count, but ladies and gentlemen, that was Spencer Love. And don't go anywhere because I'm going to give you my thoughts on this interview and what's happening next time on The Tristen Law Show.
Hello to all of you Tristen Law Show podcast listeners. This is Frank Mandolini. You may not recognize this voice. I am the Italian podcaster who talks about the business side of wrestling. Yeah, I know, it's quite niche. But if you look for last minute wrestling podcast on all of your social media and wherever you get your podcast, you've been amazed to find interviews with people such as Rob Van Dam or Matthew Gregg from Botchamania and many others, so you get to know many aspects of the wrestling business that normally you don't hear in wrestling podcasts. Because let's face it, who wants to hear another guy talk about Monday Night Raw? Yeah, me neither. So guys, go to lmwpodcast.com or search for LMW Podcast everywhere in the interweb. And remember guys, this is Frank Mandolini from the Last Minute Wrestling Podcast, and you stay safe.
Welcome back to the Tristen Law Show, and I hope that you're having a great time. We're looking to promote your band or brand here on the Tristen Law Show. Hey, all you've got to do is contact the Tristen Law Show at tristenlawshow.com, or hey, if email's your thing, send an email to tristenlawshow@gmail.com for more info. I've got a really cool and tasty brand that wants to partner with me, and let me tell you, it's going to be yummy. I can't wait for you to hear from that brand and for you to tell them that I sent you. But what do you think of my guy Spencer Love? Here's what I think. I don't know the dude, but I felt like I've known him forever. Funny ass guy in my opinion, entertaining guy, and I love what he's doing up there in Canada. You see, there are a lot of content creators out there because it's so easy for anybody to create a YouTube video or to create a podcast in this day and age. But some of us are good and some of us aren't good. Spencer, I think Spencer's good. And I suggest that you go check out what he does. Go to ilovewrestling.ca, not .com if you live in America, and tell him that I sent you. Spencer, my guy, thank you for the time, and I'm sure that I'll see you soon. Next time here in the Tristen Law Show, you're going to meet Canadian pro wrestling sensation Gabriel Fuerza. Subscribe, follow, or just do whatever your podcast player wants you to do so that you can be here next time. If you like this episode, I need a favor from you. Yes, I'm talking to you. Share this on your favorite social media platform and don't forget to tag myself or the show. Don't make this be the thing that you do. Make this be the thing that we do. You can also walk up to a random stranger and tell them to listen to the Tristen Law Show. Yeah, they might think you're crazy, but who cares what other people think, right? Fine. If you're worried about being judged, go on over to tristenlawshow.com and at least buy a shirt because people will know that you're really cool. Rate the Tristen Law Show 5 stars in Apple Podcast and leave a review, please. Reviews mean a lot. Whichever podcast platform you're using to listen, please follow or subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. The best part is that it's free. Learn about myself and the Tristen Law Show by typing tristenlawshow.com in your internet-enabled device for more info. I'll be waiting for you next week. I'm Tristen Law, and you've been listening to the Tristen Law Show. And until next time, Adios.